driving.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Leslie Ellis. This is Arthur Orduna. We were just talking about the last time we did a panel together here at the Moscone Center. It was about the same topic. It was about interactive TV and advanced advertising, and it was at this big conference that starts with the letter J and has something to do with coffee. And there was 3 of us there. Arthur, me, Bill Shepard, and the AV guy.
And the AV guy.
It
was one of the best panels I've ever given.
So at the risk of starting all kinds of bad puns about what things you shouldn't do in a canoe, this represents Arthur's tipping point into a much larger audience. I know, I'm just going to stop with the whole canoe thing. Don't stand up in the canoe. All right, so a lot to discuss here, especially since this is one of the first times we've actually heard from a canoe person in a venue like this. So I thought we'd just start at the beginning, Arthur, and tell us very basically what is advanced about advanced advertising this time around.
Thanks, Tom. That was good. Actually, I think it's probably, David Verklin, our CEO, likes to say that what we're trying to do is actually stand on ladders that have already been built by other people. I think if we look at what we're trying to do in terms of advanced advertising, it's something that a lot of the people in this room already have either A, predefined, B, have been working on for quite a while, C, have created models that have been working at least on a local level, and D, we just want to try to take that on a national level in a coordinated fashion from a stewardship perspective. And I can break down what that means. So, but at the core of all of that, to answer your question, is data. All right, is the ability to present something that's really relevant to that target audience, whether it's an individual or a household, because it has the best opportunity for actually creating some kind of an action on the part of that person. And surrounding that is the ability to capture the data around that whole transaction or around that whole relationship, right? And to do so in a manner that's legal, in a manner that respects privacy, and that won't get me and the other canoe people in an orange jumpsuit, I think is the key thing. So at a high level, that's what we mean by advanced advertising. Obviously, there's different modalities and different kinds of applications and services, but at the core of it is that, utilizing data to present something that's incredibly relevant and making sure that we can learn from that experience and it generates value really for everybody who's involved in that entire transaction.
And the story of Canoe, correct me if I'm wrong, it started out that the MSOs, Comcast, Time Warner, Cox, all the big guys, commissioned a report from McKinsey which said that the operators were losing $14 billion a year. They're leaving it on the table because they weren't doing more of a national advertising buy.
Well, I'll actually flip that around. The core of that is correct. There was a study that was commissioned by the 3 media chiefs of the top 3 MSOs, and they brought in some of the other MSOs as well. What it said at that point, because this was about 2.5 years ago, we're generating as an industry about $5 billion in advertising. That's cable, right?
Local advertising.
It's primarily based on our local inventory, on our local spot business. But the intent was to look out at the rest of the broadcast advertising industry and also just to look at advertising in general and where it was going and to say, are there additional opportunities for incremental revenue for cable specifically if we could act together both from a business and from a technical perspective. If we could make, in essence, the cable platform conjointly the best target for advertising dollars. And how would we do that? Answering that question is what led to Project Canoe. And I see a couple of folks here like Walt Michaels and others who were involved from the beginning with what Project Canoe is all about, which was answering that question both on a technical and on a business level. And the simple answer to that question was, well, let's build a national platform. Let's do this from the perspective of creating a business that can work directly with other inventory owners, not just us as MSOs who own 5% of the inventory, but with broadcasters, with networks, et cetera. And took us a little while to get our act together in terms of being able to figure out what this company would look like and who would be on it and what the initial targets are. And just to rehash stuff that you already know, but for the audience, so we actually then created Canoe Ventures, which is an LLC. It's headquartered in Manhattan. We brought in a CEO, David Verklin, who came from the advertising world. He was president or chair and CEO of Aegis Kara, North America, and he started officially in August, I believe, of last year. So he's been on the job now for about 6 or 7 months. We opened the doors officially then, and here we go.
And just structurally, because I heard a little birdie say this, are you opening an office in Denver? I'm from Denver, and over the last 20 years, I've watched all the companies leave for Philadelphia and the East Coast. So we love when we hear people coming to Denver.
We're definitely looking for systems integration and test facilities, and we think that Denver is the best place to do that. There's a confluence, obviously, a lot of the MSOs there, a lot of programmers are there. It's sort of centrally located. There's some decent restaurants. You know, it'll be good.
And don't forget the skiing.
Skiing?
All right. So when you talk to canoe people, either at the MSO side or in Canoe, there's always this phrase above the line.
The line.
Well, that's above the line. Well, that's below the line. Can you explain the line and why some things are above and below?
Okay,
what
this
that
is definitely
means?
putting me on the spot in a good way because there are some people in the audience who actually are helping to define the line, so they're going to keep me honest here. At a high level, the line is really composed of specifications, interfaces, and service level agreements, right? Performance and operational guarantees or promises, so that we can create an abstraction between Canoe and between participating MSOs and potentially other network operator affiliates. And it allows us to have a common way of creating an application or a service from the Canoe side that would be populated by programmers, by the folks who are actually on the creative side and own the inventory or own that 30-second spot.
So your hand is up here, so those people are above the line?
Yeah, think of even another line. I mean, sorry. Canoe's in the middle. Think of a sandwich, all right? And then the first slice of bread. This is a terrible analogy, but I'm getting hungry.
Well, it's like Canoe is up here and the
wait,
MSO's
it's past
feet
lunch.
up
I just flew in from New York, so it's hungry. So the top bread thing is actually the programmers and networks, right? So there's actually a layer of interface between Canoe and those programmers, and it's primarily in how are we going to, a lot of that is around the application itself. So an example is the interactive application. We want to get a campaign going nationally before the end of this year that's based on EBIF around RFI, request for information. And so we're going to communicate with them, especially primarily from a sales order management perspective. We will expect some data from them, but we have to provide them transparency, pre-flight of an interactive campaign, during the flight itself, and then obviously post-flight it would be nice to invoice and bill them and give them a report and distribute some monies out. Then in the filling in the middle is Canoe, and it probably looks like that right now, kind of messy. And then the bottom layer of bread are the MSOs, or the participating MSOs. So there are actually two sets of interrelated interfaces, specs, and SLAs that surround Canoe from a transactional perspective. Does that make sense to people, or am I babbling? Yeah?
Kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, and we're going to get way deep into all this interface stuff you're working on. Before we get there, though, just conceptually, run us through an example of an ad campaign and how it would play out before Canoe and after Canoe.
You mean the world pre-Canoe?
Yeah, like I'm a national advertiser. I want to do something. I want to buy cable instead of buying Chicago, instead of buying Philadelphia.
Well, that's exactly how
it
it would work before we came together with Canoe. If you're a national advertiser, you wanted to buy multiple DMAs with a linear spot. You go to NCC, right? You go to the current organization that's also an arm of the MSOs that does a very good job of selling jointly some of our spots pooled together for national advertisers for cross-buys. But that's a linear 30-second spot, right? So when you move into the area that we're all trying to work together on collectively as Canoe, it's when you start doing a couple of things to that spot. You want to start adding some measurability or accountability to the spot based on the actual usage or the actual viewing of that spot, all right? So that's the data portion. Right now, if you wanted to do that with MSOs, you'd have to do it on an individual basis. This was pre-Canoe. The idea behind Canoe is to be able to do that nationally, collectively, with all of the participating MSOs to a common set of data standards and data models. All right, that's one. Second thing that you'd want to do to that 30-second spot is add some degree of interactivity. Why would you want to add interactivity? Because I think the core business driver there is to actually start increasing the value of the 30-second spot. Right? Interactivity is one means, an initial means of doing that. I charge X amount right now for that 30-second spot. If I'm able to provide, as an inventory owner, say ESPN, if I'm able to provide you measurability in terms of data, and I'm able to provide you some degree of additional value because of interactivity, I'll charge you X plus Y. Right? So being able to do that interactivity today, sure, you can do that. A lot of the MSOs, when I was at Bright House, we did that too. But again, it was individually. And what Canoe is trying to do is leverage a lot of the good standards work and a lot of the good collaboration that's already been happening for the last, feels like 50 million years. And eBIF is probably the first point, not the only point, but the first point of connection there for us, so that we can be viewed as a single platform, as a single target for the interactivity perspective. And then the third thing that we want to add to that 30-second spot is addressability. And that's when we start talking about relevance. That's the first thing that I said why we're trying to do Canoe, which is what David's example he always uses is, you know, playing a dog food ad in the household of a dog owner. And even more important, it would be great to play a car ad in the household of someone who's looking to buy a car and whose lease is expiring in 30 to 60 days. Right? So the addressability, again, we will provide a single interface, hopefully from a sales and a stewardship perspective of the campaign to these programmers. We'll provide an interface that we're collectively working with the MSOs on for the data collection that's required for that kind of an addressable linear household campaign. But we are solely, we're critically dependent on the MSOs themselves to select what kind of addressable technology, whether it's client-based, whether it's through Switch Digital Video, whether it's through a hybrid of that, that will then provide both the interactivity and the addressability for that campaign. So being able to add that addressability obviously then gives the inventory owner X plus Y plus Z on the business model backup to that advertiser. And so that delta, or that additional margin, which is incremental to today's business models on the 30-second spot linearly, is where we think we can accrue enough value to, you know, ensure.
9 zeros behind the 14.
Yeah, I'm not committing to any numbers here, Baumgartner. Okay, no freaking revenue numbers up here. So, but that's at a high level, that's the intent behind the model.